Hi guys, this is a talk that I did at the 2019 Northwest Chocolate Festival. It's on the story of Manoa Chocolate and how to start a chocolate factory. It showed time-lapse of each step in the chocolate making process that we did as we built factories 1, 2, 3, and 4 and scaled up. And then a bunch of questions at the end. So, enjoy. See a show of hands of how many chocolate makers or wanting to be chocolate makers there are? Alright. This is going to be wonderful. I want you guys to raise your hands and ask questions and interact the whole time. Because what we've been doing lately is sharing as much information as we possibly can on how to start a chocolate factory from scratch to where we're at. And I wanted to create a lot of videos on the information I wish I had when I started in 2010 to like 2014. Because there just wasn't a lot of information at that time. So we had to figure out a lot on our own. And we're quite isolated in Hawaii. Briefly, I'm going to tell a little bit of the story, but also we've built 4 chocolate factories at this point, or expanded 4 times since 2012 to now. We just recently finished our most recent factory, which is now able to produce, we could probably do 500 kilos a day. And we started doing, like the little tiny grinders. And so the first video is, the little tiny grinders all the way till ball mills, where we're at this point. I got into chocolate because one of my friends got the job at the University of Hawaii studying the plant. So I'd go into this lab at the university, and it was specializing in macadamia nuts, coffee, kava, and recently cacao, because farmers in Hawaii had started to ask questions about why is this pod yellow and this pod orange, and why is this seed white and this seed purple in the same pod, and they just didn't really have the answers. And so my friend came from a geneticist background and fell right into it and really loved it. And so I was exposed to it on the agricultural side, which was wonderful, because having that exposure, I believe, has allowed us to make much better chocolate, because I see it all the time, from the growing all the way through the post-harvest handle. And it's like winemaking. If you want to make the best wine, you better start with the best grapes. And it's a lot easier to do if you're always by the farms or have your own. And so it's all about this control. But I'm getting a little sidetracked. So I'd go into this lab and help crack pods open and set up micro ferments and do the chocolate making on a really, really small scale. And that exposed me to something that hit a checklist for what I found important in starting a business. Because I always knew I wanted to start a business. And I didn't want to start a small business. I wanted to start a business that would make a true impact on the world, and that meant getting big. And so the checklist worked because I really wanted to plant trees. And so the bigger this chocolate factory would get, the more cacao trees in an agroforestry system we could set up. And so I was very idealistic and naive, which I think helped a lot, because I had no idea what I was about to get into. Okay, so that's in 2010. I didn't really start, I worked in my parents' house for about a year and a half, just messing around. I took a student loan because no one else was going to loan a 22-year-old money at like that interest rate. And I bought small scale equipment. I built a bicycle winnower, you'll see some of it. We built a barbecue roaster and just patched together this chocolate making equipment that I could run out of my parents' house, to the point where I was giving away enough of it and started to sell a little bit of it, to the point where my mom's like, all right, get out of my kitchen and go rent a place if you're serious. And so that's what I ended up doing, and started the realization that I also had to run a business while learning how to make chocolate, and realized that the scale of starting that small was very painful, and all of the hidden costs of doing business almost broke me many, many times. And so I'm going to show this first video, but this is when we started in 2012. We opened in June, and went in blind and had to kind of do a sink or swim thing. This was an old real estate office on the 2nd floor of a building. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit. Starting with those little grinders, they're not designed to try and run all the time. They were constantly breaking. You guys noticed the grain mill? I found that at a farmer's place who's like, yeah, sure, give it a try. I haven't used it in 30 years. So we hooked it up and it turned the nibs into a paste, which we could then load in there easier without breaking the bearings and things like that on the stone grinders. The little tempering machine, that didn't work at all for us because Hawaii is so humid. It was very, very painful to try and temper like that because of the amount of moisture in the air. So we eventually got a continuous tempering machine UC, but that worked much better for us. It never worked for us at this point. I got really lucky with one thing up there. We were able to retail. My whole business model initially was to wholesale because I was like, oh, I just want to make chocolate. No, we had to also retail. So I'd make chocolate and then I'd hear the door ring open and someone would come in from the restaurant downstairs. This is crazy. The only reason we really stayed alive was because the bathrooms were on the second floor. And so people would wait in line at this restaurant and they'd be there for like an hour and a half. Sometimes they'd wait for 40 minutes. And eventually they'd walk upstairs and I had this little Science and Chocolate factory. And so they would come in and be like, okay, what are you guys really doing here? Oh, I'm making chocolate, here's a tasting, and I'd have run from the back where I was on the bicycle. I'd do a tasting and someone would purchase, 1 or 2 bars at retail. This was amazing because I had money right away to buy new raw materials or whatever it might have been that I needed. It was only later that we started, 11 months later that we started to wholesale more. And wow, this was a rude awakening. Not only do you don't always get paid at all, but you also have to wait usually 30 days. And so if you're trying to grow and you have to wait 30 days to get your money, all of a sudden you're negative, and then you're way more negative. And if you're starting to pick up multiple accounts, you're getting way, way negative because you're growing. And so this is that was true growing pains. That didn't happen for, I'd say Whole Foods was our first customer. Jacket Chocolate Covered was our first customer in California. He's almost everyone's. This place has got about 1,000 different chocolate bars. He's most people's first customer in Noe Valley. Anyway, Whole Foods picked us up in Hawaii, and I thought, oh my God, we made it. They ordered like 30 bars a month at first, which didn't do much. But at this time, we were doing everything by hand, so it was hard to keep up with just our own little retail and the little bits of wholesale that started to occur. I had started this with a bank loan of $15,000, which I realized as I began doing that construction wouldn't get you very far. Ran out of money just on the initial deposit for the space. Then to become a new customer with the electric company, you're paying all this money, you never even see it again until you move out. And so 15,000 went really, really fast. I'd spent most of that before I even had anything to show for it. And so I borrowed another 15 from my parents. And that's pretty much what got it going. And then it just was kind of like brute forcing and ignorance for the next few years to get it there. So that ability to retail saved us. And that's still the model that we follow. So we were initially 100% retail. After almost a year, we started to wholesale a little bit to Whole Foods, and that started to open the doors. Because once Whole Foods took us, other stores were like, oh, okay, they must be all right. We might as well take them too and try it out. I think it took so long for Whole Foods to take us because they didn't think we'd be around. We were chopping the top off of bags, like merchandise bags that you receive a donut in or something. We'd stamp it by hand. We'd then fold it over and seal it with a sticker. Yeah, this got really painful. We'd be up till 2 in the morning. There was just way too much labor. And so as I was absorbing all of this labor and realizing I had no time for anything else, I started to realize that I needed to get bigger machines. And so we did a Kickstarter. And we raised almost $19,000. And we bought one stone melanger that did about 20 kilos. And we bought one continuous tempering machine. At this point, things started to work. However, I didn't understand that I spent all of the money and then still had to pay taxes on it and still had to pay Kickstarter their fees. And so I then had to get everyone their chocolate. This became very difficult as well, but we were retailing and it was going into Christmas. And so we did have enough capital to get us through that, pay everything off, and somehow survived through that Christmas and kind of hit this next little growth period by using the bigger equipment. And so let's take a look at the next video, if I can figure this out.
How many square feet was that first location?
620 on the second floor. And I keep saying second floor because everything had to get carried up. So initially I had a lot of friends who were like, oh, I'll help you out. But then as we kept buying more and more beans, I'm sure you guys know, 68 kilos or something like that going up the stairs. It's like 140 pounds or something. It's like carrying myself up the stairs. Okay, let's try the second one, because this is when things started to get much, much better, and I started to understand economies of scale and how important that is, as well as to increase our revolving line of credit with the bank so that we could be able to purchase larger quantities of raw materials. Because at one point, I thought, oh my God, I'm gonna save us so much money by buying 3 boxes of cocoa butter. Well, I ran out of money and then couldn't pay people, which was really, really uncomfortable, and I never did that again, and I hope to God I never do, because I didn't like that. So this next factory, this next factory was in the adjacent suite, and so we ran out of electricity. Chocolate's power hungry, and we started tapping into the panel, which is in that back left corner there, and borrowing for a second melanger, a second stone grinder that we got. And we were making more chocolate. We ended up getting a roaster, you'll see here in a second. And we didn't tell the landlord that we were receiving the electricity bill still. And so eventually they started showing it, and the landlord was like, well, you gotta rent it now, which was kind of scary, because we did the math and like, oh my God, we gotta sell another 15 bars every day, or 10 bars every day at retail. Can we do that? And it worked just fine. We ended up selling like 40 extra bars per day at retail. This is when things started to work as a scale. We got a winner from Maru, mainly by coming here, talking to a lot of people about equipment. That's the power of networking and being open. Yes. Yeah, the question was about molds. No, they're not cheap. But we really wanted to put together a nicer package repeatedly and to always try and improve in everything that we did. And so we really liked the idea of having our own molds. The ones that we were buying, we did use the generic molds, but they kept cracking all the time. And so at a certain point when you've rebought molds, and I don't like to waste anything, I've kind of got the sustainability mindset, we just sucked it up and bought, I don't know, we probably bought 50 molds or less. And they were maybe $11 each at the time. Tooling fee was probably 750 bucks, and then there's an extra 700 in there somewhere. But we ended up getting our own molds pretty early on. And we were able to do that because we were retailing. So that was the second place. At this point, we were able to hire people. I was able to have a little bit of time to focus on trying to get new accounts. And I pretty much just did my best to keep those grinders spinning all the time and to try and find good beans. There was a lot of pain in trying to find good beans to get to Hawaii and buying in small scales. Nobody wants to work with you when you're small, especially in 2013 in Hawaii. Because everything that we do, we have to then ship again to Hawaii. So say it goes from Ecuador, it then lands in Oakland, it then has to get another 30% on top of that to get to Hawaii. And that's not a good model. However, that's still much, much cheaper than Hawaiian beans. So at the time we were maybe paying $10 a kilo or $8 a kilo for really good beans coming in, but we didn't have really good connections with the farms we were purchasing from. So we buy from a broker, and then I'd say if we bought 6 bags, which was huge for us at the time, 2 would be really good, 1 would be okay, and a few would be terrible. And then you're just stuck sitting on this. And so that's another one that was really painful to try and figure out how to never let that happen again, because we couldn't make bad chocolate. we were making worse chocolate than we are now, but as craft chocolate makers, we cannot make bad chocolate, otherwise we're trying to compete with the big guys, and that's not what we're doing. We want you to taste those interesting fruity characteristics or nutty flavors. We want to showcase the terroir or the wild yeast and bacteria that are doing those ferments. So that's more along the lines of what we're doing, which is why we're always talking about wine, and I started to learn about wine at this time. Does anyone have any questions at this point?
I mean, did you consider doing the next version of the factory outside of Hawaii?
No. A lot of people have asked me that. I'm born and raised there. I always wanted to stay there. I like the idea of our economy working where we can, so back to the big picture, we can grow the fruit trees there in an agroforestry setup, add value to those fruit trees, and then make a chocolate bar that's super high end to export all over the world. And so in this case, it is the Napa wine model, or Bordeaux, or Burgundy. Whereas in Burgundy, things are really expensive. In Napa Valley, the land is really expensive. However, they're not selling grapes. They're selling bottles of wine, and that's why it works. And so that's why we have to do the same thing. Otherwise, we can't compete with Ecuador. Ecuador grows grape beans. Peru grows grape beans. All over the world, they can grow grape beans. However, we will be growing some of the best chocolate in the world, mainly because that friend of mine became one of the world's leading cacao consultants at this point and knows a lot about genetics, and we've got a lot of different really quality cacao trees there. So we're starting our own, jumping ahead. We leased 55 acres a couple of years ago, and we're about to start planting. We'll plant up to about 25 acres in the next few years here, just because we have to control our supply. And this goes back to the quality thing. We want to control every single step of that process, and that's how you get a really good quality product. It's all the nuances coming together. Okay, so yeah, let's move on. Let's see what this next one is. These are all new for me too. My brother just sent these to me yesterday. I just got back from a trip I was at the Salon du Chocolat in Paris. I came in yesterday, and this is the first time I've ever done this presentation, which is really fun for me as well. Okay. As I said, we could have probably stopped there, and I could probably have made, $40,000 at a certain point, and we could have done wine and chocolate pairings if we started to do there. But I didn't want to start a small company. I know that we now needed to add another element to the chocolate factory, which was distribution, which we couldn't do from two small grinders. And so, fortuitously, there was a man who bought a farm on Maui, or wanted to start a farm on Maui, and he said, Dylan, if you could get any equipment you wanted to scale up to another size, what would it be? Write me a report, and I'm going to give you a loan for it. And he gave me a loan for $130,000 at 2%, and we bought the equipment that we wanted. All we had to do was not only pay him back, but also tell him what we thought of this equipment and if he should do it, because he's now starting a 50-acre farm, which he's well into, and he's building a factory, which he's now building a factory, which is almost complete, and it's a little bit bigger than ours currently. And so that was a really good win-win situation. So that's why we did not get a couple more 20-kilo stone launders. We went towards something like more industrial called ball mills, and had to find a place on the ground floor because ball mills wouldn't go on the second floor, and chocolate, once again, is very power hungry. And so we found a space down the street from us because we wanted to start doing pallets and distribute, have our chocolate all over at least the US initially, and maybe the world soon to come. So this is that next one. It was, we called it the cave because there was no windows. It was in like the basement of this medical building. And all we really had to do was fix the floors and get some electrical in there. So overall, it was pretty simple compared to the next one that we're gonna watch. But we called it our cave, and this is the next step in our growth. So yeah, the whole idea there was to start setting up pallets. And there was a huge learning curve going from throwing the nibs in and adding sugar and waiting 3 days or 4 days to industrial type of equipment like that. I mean, I took on one partner kind of in the very beginning because he came in and saw me pedaling this little bicycle and said, I think I can help you. And he was an engineer that had just come out of Kraft Foods, and he would say, Kraft Foods would say, here's $100 million, like make Philadelphia cream cheese, make Lunchables. Here, DiGiorno pizzas, we want 3 a second. What do you need? And so that's his background. And so he came in at this point, like bicycle days, and helped us get to that point, at least on the understanding of how to lay out the electrical and to understand processing and wear hairnets and shoes, which I still don't do. I know I need to, but I'm not in the factory floor as much. And at that point, I started to try and find distributors and really knocking on doors. But at this point, I was used to getting rejected a lot, so it wasn't uncomfortable to constantly hassle people to try and get it out there. Our chocolate got so much better once we got those machines. And I studied a lot. I looked at universals, which are use blades to scrape the inside of the machines. Universals sound amazing. I've never used one, but those sound like really good machines. It didn't make sense for us for a number of reasons. I looked at roller mills, like 3-roll refiners, 5-roll refiners. That didn't make sense for a number of reasons. Ball mills just seemed to make the most sense, and I'm so happy I chose them. For me, it works really, really well. We can do 100 kilos or 120 kilos every 4 hours in that thing. And so it gave us a lot of room to grow. I also learned some lessons pretty early on that if you don't buy equipment and you don't pay yourself much, you're gonna get taxed a lot. And I just hated that idea because there was never any money really there anyway, because in manufacturing, if you reinvest your money into your raw materials, the taxes just looks at it as like, hey, that's money in your bank account. We're going to tax you on those beans that are sitting there and all that packaging that's sitting there and all that chocolate that's sitting there. I know for you think it's an expense, but for them it's not. So you end up getting taxed on that. And I just hated that concept. So I put myself into debt multiple times in order to buy equipment, which I was so tired of hand packaging and doing everything really small. So we just kept putting money into equipment when we could find the right time to do that. So we bought a flow wrapper, we bought a 12-kilo coffee roaster, which we could put about 15 kilos of cacao in. And I was always buying things much bigger than we actually needed, because I knew we could grow into it, and I didn't want to have a bottleneck with that same thing that soon. And so when you buy something new, you just create a bottleneck somewhere else, which is fine. I've come to accept that, and it's kind of a fun game. And that's also how I look at all of this. I guess I'm more of an entrepreneur than anything, and I see this as a game. To me, it's fun, especially now that we've expanded out of the hell phase, the first 2 to 4 years, where you're constantly just treading water. Like I worked 1,000 days straight, literally 1,000 days straight, didn't miss one day. I worked 16 hours a day. That was the first couple of years. So now it's a lot more comfortable, but I have such a good finger on the pulse of what's going on and what to do next because of that. So let's go ahead and look at the next one. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
I was going to ask about wrapping before you bought the machine. Like how many hours did you, I mean, you're making
Yeah, so,
kilos.
and so this is the other thing I think I said earlier. First world labor prices. So it was such a stretch to pay minimum wage at the time was $7.25 an hour. And we were doing so much things by hand that I just knew everything had to go into equipment if we could find the ability to do it. Like initially, so my younger brother, he's 12 years younger than me. At the time, I think he was 14. They're like, hey, bring your friends. I'll buy you guys surfboards. You work off the surfboards. You can't legally work at that age. So that's kind of how we were getting by and bootstrapping it that way. But now we can, yeah, child labor. First world child labor. All right, so this space we just finished. We opened kind of like a soft opening in April, really had a grand opening in June, but we moved out of what we called our cave and brought everything over. And I thought we could build this place out in like 3 months, and it took 9 months. And everything cost more than twice as much and took more than twice as long. So this is another thing that everyone needs to know. The other part is, you always need more space than you think. We've outgrown this place, and it's been, what, like 5 or 6 months? Because we legally spaced everything apart, but that's a little bit different. Mostly it's the raw material storage again. Probably half your factory needs to be just storage for boxes of boxes and bags and packaging. But let's go ahead and watch this one. This is, we leased 3,200 square feet down here, and then an office space in the same building. So we maybe have close to 5,000 square feet in this space. So the first space was 620 square feet. We then pretty much doubled it, so it was like 1,300 square feet. Then we added another 850 square feet on the ground floor. We moved out of that one, and we recently just closed the upstairs factory, and we only have this now. And so this is the new one. So that's where we're at now. I'm gonna go back a little bit. Initially we were 100% retail. Slowly, it started to be a bit wholesale. Wholesale was maybe 5%, then it became 15%, then it became 25%. Then we had distribution, that started at 5%, then it became kind of 8%, 9%. We started to do online. You know, that's always stayed kind of small, but we've also grown a lot. So now what our business looks like is, I really like stability. So we're about 46% retail, which makes us really strong because we always have enough cash flow. Well, the bank account's always kind of a little bit negative, a little bit positive, but we're constantly getting money in right away. We're about 45% wholesale. We're 5 or 6% distribution. And when I say distribution is Manoa Chocolate selling to a distributor, say A Priori in Utah. A Priori that sells it to the Rocky Mountain Whole Food chain or Central Market in Texas or wherever that might be. That's what I call distribution. And the reason I say that's different than wholesale is because we wholesale within Hawaii ourselves. We keep that 30% margin because we can. We can handle Hawaii on our own. So that's us selling to Whole Foods. And then online is the best, and that's the fastest growing. 6 months ago, we started almost a year ago, we started an online subscription program. where we would do 3 bars each month to your doorstep. We do 1 new flavor every single month. We had 12 people on that list 6 months ago. We now have close to 200. So that one's another really nice one because that's a best case scenario for a business. You don't have the overhead built in. You can do that from anywhere.
How do you package that and keep it from overheating?
In the summer, so how do you package that and keep it from overheating? In the summer, we look up the weather before we ship it anywhere.
Styrofoam or just?
No, I hate that stuff.
Good.
I hate styrofoam. We use insulated bags, which I don't even want to look into what that's made of, but it's an insulated bag. So we need to do something like that. It's all about insulation. And we've learned a lot from shipping and making chocolate in Hawaii just because it's tropical. It's great for growing in most cases, except for the wind. Great growing conditions. It's difficult to make it. And this is where we're now looking a lot more into air conditioning. We need so much more AC than I ever would have thought, as well as dehumidification. In one moment,
Yes, you're in Hawaii.
yes.
And your internet list, your sales online, is it expensive to ship from Hawaii to the US?
No, we're really lucky for shipping to the US. We're part of the US, so we have flat rate boxes, so we take advantage of that. And now our volumes are starting to grow, so places want to work with us. FedEx, for example, is very competitive at certain sizes. At this point, we do a lot of FedEx. Yes?
The power, you mentioned power and now AC. Have you
Yeah.
considered sustainable?
We don't own our building, we lease. And so I'm trying to push the building owner to go to solar, which makes a lot of sense for him. It's sunny. But for now, we just are part of the grid. And we brought in 400 amps into the factory, and we are out of power, which is crazy, because that was really fast. And so we're kind of like, turn this on and don't run that. I have a pretty good understanding of, not good understanding, I have a better understanding of how this works now, electricity-wise. Yeah. Oh God, how do you price it? Pricing's so challenging. I worked backwards. And so I said, okay, if we want our chocolate to retail for under the $10 ceiling, we need to work backwards from there because the store wants to usually keystone things, meaning they want to double it. They want to mark it up 100%. And that means, okay, 5, and then you sell it to a distributor, so take off 30% from there, you're down to like 3 something, and that's the game we played in. So we lost money, not only distributing, but wholesaling. We lost money when we were wholesaling initially, just because I wanted to increase our volumes. Like I got everyone around me telling them I'm nuts, but they'd never started a business, and so they weren't worth listening to. So I lost money on wholesaling because it cost me more than $5 to make a chocolate bar back then. Then we started to purchase larger quantities of things. So all of a sudden, it got cheaper on the raw material side as well as the manufacturing side to make that product. And all of a sudden, oh my God, we're breaking even on that, but we're still retailing. This is why it all worked. Then I did the same thing for distribution, and that helps the volumes as well. And so all of a sudden, when you're selling 5,000 bars at a time, you need to buy a lot more packaging. But this is also where the growing pains came in again, because all of a sudden you're buying 70,000 packages at a time. And so you're using that line of credit a lot. But it's just a riskier, faster way to grow. Yeah.
Why do you keep one grind?
I found it much easier to maintain and make better quality at the phase we are now. It's much easier, just because we do 120 kilos in a batch. So I've been doing all the roasting until just recently. For me, most of the quality happens in sourcing and then not burning the beans or not under roasting. If you don't under roast and you don't burn them, chances are you're going to get great chocolate if you bought good beans. And getting good beans is the hardest part. Understanding what good beans are is the hardest part. So as a chocolate maker, that's what everyone should be focusing on trying to understand. Now when I get samples, I'm able to just taste them raw and know pretty close what it's going to taste like as a finished chocolate bar and what I want to do with it. I've been doing it almost every day for 10 years, so I've kind of got a grasp on it, but still, it's just practice. I know what I like, so that doesn't mean it's right for everybody. I like almost all chocolate, actually. I like the base chocolatey stuff, I like the nutty stuff, I like the fruity stuff. But anything done well, it's kind of like, oh, what's your favorite wine? Well, I like a Sauvignon Blanc that's done well, I like a Cabernet that's done well, I like a Malbec, so you can do any of them well. I really like Tanzania beans right now because I love that punchy, fruity, raisiny, citrusy note. So anyway, yeah.
Is there a, I appreciate the way that you're sharing your numbers and trying to match up the machinery and the cash flow. Is there a magic size 5-person factory where it can break even? Is there or is it a 10-person factory?
Yeah, so that second size that we were at, and it depends on how much money you want to make in a year. Yeah, what's the magic size, like if you wanted to just stay at 5 people? I could have stopped at like 2 or 3 stone melangers if we kept retailing the way we were. And we are super heavy customer service. We have some of the most outstanding customer service I've ever seen in my life. You come in and we will walk you through every step in that process and do a beautiful guided tasting. And if you liked it, you will end up buying chocolate. So as long as you have that formula, it works really well.
So you're saying it's the lowest, even 3 people?
Depends on what kind of machines you have. So if you had 5 people and because you're going to need to retail a lot, so you're going to need 3 people just on your retail floor in order to sell enough chocolate. And enough chocolate is like you need to sell $1,000 a day retailing in order for it to be comfortable. Because at the end of the year, that's only $365,000 and you have a lot of expenses. So you hopefully more. Okay, fine.
I have a similar situation. I have the Manoa Chocolate factory in a little island in the Caribbean.
Okay.
And do you have dehumidifiers in your place?
Yeah, and this is something now that we're starting to focus more and more on is understanding relative humidity. So we got these little sensors, and they go into our cellar, our chocolate cellar, and then our room where we temper. And so I can link it to my phone, and I can know what the temperature and relative humidity are in those rooms. And so you just buy a little dehumidifier, but when it rains, it just doesn't work sometimes. And so we just call it a day and focus somewhere else. Yeah, I would definitely get a dehumidifier. They're a few $100s, and it'll save you. I'm shocked at how much water comes out of the air.
Do you have a booth upstairs?
I do have a booth upstairs, yes.
Mind if I come by?
Yes, please.
Extremely similar situation like this.
Try all of our chocolate. Everybody, let's, yeah.
So you talked about sourcing the chocolate bean. I think it's a very important part of business.
Sourcing is the most important part.
Do you ever visit the locations where you source from?
I really liked this idea. So my whole concept was to be able to go surf and then go and source beans, which is why chocolate really fit this. I wanted to marry these passions. Since we spend all our money on equipment, I come to the cities in order to sell it, which usually means, I'm Vancouver, Toronto, Seattle, San Francisco, Paris, Tokyo, Singapore, Hong Kong. So I've been focusing way more on that end of it, which don't feel bad for me. I love it. It's super fun. But I wanted to go to Costa Rica, and Peru, and Ecuador, and Brazil, and that hasn't happened yet. But that friend that I initially started learning from, he goes to every single one of these places, and I get samples. And at this point, I really know who I can trust and work with. And so I started making videos called Craft Chocolate TV, and in all these videos are the videos that I wish I could have seen from 2010 to 2014. And so that's what Craft Chocolate TV is. And so I share where I would source from right now. And a lot of it's about, we try and direct trade, but that's not always a reality. If you're really small, you can't buy a container. It's fine. If you can trust the broker to do a good job and bring in the container and then buy it, okay, you're going to pay more for it, but that's okay, right? Because you didn't have to buy a lot of it. So you might pay $7.50 or $8.50 a kilo, but you didn't have to buy 12.5 metric tons. So yeah, but sourcing is the most important part of this entire process if you want to make really good chocolate. What's the growth of the SKUs? Like how many SKUs do we have? I think we focused on single origin bars at first. Maybe had like 4 of them. And single origins are wonderful because people come in and they taste it. It's like, oh my God, I never knew chocolate could be like this. And then they buy your inclusion bars. So we started adding more inclusions because we wanted to stay in business. And so now we've got like, I don't know, 15 bars, but not all of them have SKUs. The little UPC codes on the back. I think we bought 50 SKUs, not from, what is it, Global GS1. I wouldn't recommend going with GS1. My understanding is it's kind of a scam. You're just buying a string of numbers to represent something so it can scan and be unique to you. So we bought old numbers that no one could touch anymore. I don't remember what website that was from. And that's what we've used, and we're running out of SKUs.
What
UPCs.
What you said the name? GS1.
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 That's what you shouldn't do.
Why the little scan?
Yeah, so the UPC codes.
Barcode?
Barcodes, yes.
Or what do you recommend?
I can't remember the website we bought it on. It was like 6 years ago. I could look it up. Yes.
You mentioned part of your decision to pursue chocolate was that it would scale. How has the reality compared to your expectations there?
We can get as big as we want. Yeah, I can sell in every city in the whole world.
How much can the market take there?
A lot.
Okay.
But a lot of it's timing. So I think if I were to try and do this in 2000, I might have struggled a lot more than I did. Like, look at craft beer. 25 years ago, people weren't paying $8 for a beer at Whole Foods. Now you walk down that aisle and it's like $18 is, you see what I'm saying, right? Now there's a huge section. And so I'd like to see lots of craft chocolate makers making really good chocolate right next to our bar at Whole Foods. To me, this is it's creating a category. Chocolate shouldn't be $3. It should be more expensive if you're paying the farmers more, if you're buying really good beans, if they're going through all those extra steps. Now, if you do things at scale, things do go way, way down in price. So you could get it much more affordable, but it doesn't have to be, and I think the market's ready to pay more. But for all of us who are still smaller, $8, $9, our Hawaiian beans cost $25 a kilo. But we keep it the same price. Well, we did until just recently. Keep it the same price as all our other bars because we wanted people to just buy their favorite bar. And then this is something that works really well. When someone buys 1 bar, it's $10. Someone buys 3 bars, we do 5% off. 4 bars, 10% off. 6 bars, 20% off. That works really, really well in order to not sell 1 bar at a time. You'd way rather sell 6 bars all day long.
Now, with the growth of the industry, you think you can lower the price if you guys are already planting in Hawaii? Can you get the price of the local?
We'll get our Hawaiian cacao down in price, but then we're running a whole nother business, which is a lot of work. So yeah, I mean, we'll probably get it down. I hope we can do it for $6 a pound is the goal. So what, $13 a kilo? 12 something a kilo?
Do you have plans to open retail on other islands?
Ooh, we tried this. We opened a shop in Waikiki because I was like, okay, more stability. Let's open this little shop, 400 square feet, Waikiki. It'll be a retail tasting room. And wow, that didn't work. That really didn't work. 5 minutes? Okay.
Why didn't it work?
Yeah, a whole bunch of reasons. We were just off the strip in Waikiki. There's thousands of people walking by every hour. We're just off that strip in kind of a funky, bad feng shui kind of place. We built a beautiful store, so pretty. And I signed a lease for 1 year. Thank God it was only a year. And also worked out what I thought, and was a really good arrangement. They took 20% of our gross sales after a few deductions. So that meant that if we didn't make a lot of money, we didn't have to pay as much. If we made a lot of money, okay, we had to pay more. But that was also comforting, and I knew that it wouldn't break us. But what ended up happening is it was a hotel, it was the Hyatt. So from 9 in the morning we had to open. They said you must open. Well, we didn't get busy until 6 in the afternoon. So you had to pay someone to be there from 9 to 5 or 6 when it wasn't busy, and then you had to stay open until 10. This was painful. It didn't work. We probably lost like $40,000, $50,000 on doing that. But we were able to take everything that we built there and move it into a factory. And I took a very valuable lesson with that as well. So it didn't break us. We still, it was a lesson. There's been a lot of lessons.
What's next beyond the future countdown?
Okay, and going back to that point, we needed also something interesting to explain the story, and we were doing a wonderful tasting still, but we didn't have the factory behind it. You didn't get that really cool feeling of looking through the windows and seeing somebody dump nibs into a grinder or, transfer chocolate into a machine. So that element's really important. Our whole factory is all windows. You can see everything, as you guys saw. This works. I don't know if you guys have ever been to Zotter in Austria. This should be a pilgrimage for anybody who ever wants to make chocolate. It is amazing. I can't even begin to tell you how cool this place is. But that's the model that works. He's in the middle of nowhere, Zotter's in the middle of nowhere. They see a couple thousand people a day drive to their factory to take a chocolate tour. You see everything. You see where they're putting shipments together. So being open works. What's next? My greater concept is to see thousands and thousands of acres planted in Hawaii. You have an agroforestry system, much like Napa Valley is, where you have different chocolate factories, not just Manoa. I'd like to see lots of them, all doing a fabulous job, say growing different genetics. We're planting right now in blocks. So we've looked at quite a few different trees based on fine flavor. We're going to do a lot of grafting, and we're going to grow in different blocks, and we're going to control different lots all the way to the finished bar. And if we want to blend, we'll blend. If we don't want to blend, we won't blend. But this is where I see chocolate really becoming more elevated, just like wine. You don't go into a vineyard and the guy's like, oh, this might be Chardonnay and this could be Petit Syrah, and that's kind of how it works right now. So we want to control more of it and see what happens.
I'm just curious, why did you choose the Alamo versus the Universal? I know you mentioned you kind of liked it, but...
Yeah, universals are really loud. Ball mills are loud. Universals are really loud, and I'd never had any experience with it, and I really liked working with pack-ins. So when you buy machines, I promise you, they will break. Guaranteed. Like everything. And so, I had enough of an understanding to realize that they would support us when things did break. And that's been a wonderful relationship. They're there for you. And a lot of companies are not. And so, the equipment was expensive relatively for what I was used to, but I got their support forever, and that's worth a lot. They'll ship me something from Italy in a few days if I really needed it. And we have random problems, like you'll get a power surge and your PLC system will go down, and all of a sudden you can't run your ball mill. And they'll say, okay, plug in the wires, and they'll try and fix it from Italy. If they can't do that, they send you a new PLC. You keep rolling. Anybody else? Yeah.
How did you get picked up by Whole Foods? You said you sent like 30 bars a month, but how did they know about you? Did you go knock on doors?
Yes, I knocked on a lot of doors and it was relentless. That was in Hawaii. And initially it was very, very slow. It then picked up to the point where we were selling hundreds of bars a day between just a few stores. We now have an account called DFS, Duty Free Stores. Those guys are blowing my mind with how few stores and how much chocolate they can sell. So there's quite a bit of opportunity for selling. They sell it for $12 a bar. We've got the biggest market of all, and they're selling it all day long. Like they're ordering. They did a $50,000 order multiple times in a row, month to month. So they're selling a lot of chocolate. So the opportunity for a craft chocolate maker to do that is definitely there with just a few stores. So. Okay, thank you guys.